Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We've got the Art of the Possible podcast. And today, a very, 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 very special guest is Dr. Hannah Macdougall. How are you, Hannah?
Bloody amazing. Thanks, Rob.
She's amazing. She's always amazing. Now, Hannah, you're a doctor, and I didn't know you were a doctor. What are you a doctor of?
Well, don't ask me to help with a cardiac arrest because I am not a medical doctor. I have done a doctor in philosophy, and specifically that PhD was in athlete wellbeing.
Ah, excellent. Now, when did you do that?
I finished up and I graduated at the end of 2017.
Right.
Did that through La Trobe University. I'm actually currently in the final stage of working with the proof editor for the final article to be published from it. So that'll be article number 4. So here we are kind of mid-2019 and there's still bits that are hanging on. But yeah, a year and a half, graduated now. Big kind of weight off the shoulders in some senses, but also a pretty proud and, very proud and a massive achievement.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, mindfulness. Tell me about mindfulness. What is it to you?
I think, Rob, we generally connect with things that help us the most in life. And for me, mindfulness came at a time where I was going through hip surgeries and rehab and was in a pretty dark place, and the psychologist at the Victorian Institute of Sport introduced me to some different techniques, and at the time she didn't call it mindfulness, but that's essentially what it was, to help me get through that time in my life, which was pretty dark. And so a little bit later, maybe 6 months later, I entered this competition in a newspaper, and it was tell us in 25 words or less what has been your happiest moment in life. I'm like, whew, shit, that's hard. One moment. So I listed probably one of my top 5, which was the day that I got a swimming leg, and my mum and we went to Bondi after the swim competition, and I was about 13 years old. And for the first time ever in my life, I was able to take off my leg, my walking leg, put on this swim leg and just walk into the water, into the waves and jump the waves. Wow. And we had prawns on the beach afterwards. So there was no wheelchairs or crutches or piggybacks. I was able to do it all on my own. So I wrote about that, and I won tickets to a happiness and wellbeing conference. And I heard from the greats like Martin Seligman and Ellen Langer, all about different wellbeing principles, and then I was also introduced to mindfulness, and I was like, "Ooh, this is me." It just rang true for me, and I was really interested, and I find it personally very beneficial to my life.
And so, is it something now that you practice still? We'll get on cycling in a moment, but do you still actively use the mindfulness side of
every
that?
Day?
Yeah.
Every day.
What's an example of it?
So from the little things that I've embedded into my life, so on my work computer I have a little app or program which every half an hour it comes up and it rings a few bells and it says breathe deeply. So I'm like, oh, right, thank you. And then I generally have a bit of a tradition of after lunch taking 5 or 10 minutes of just doing some breath work. Right. And then instead of stretching and looking at my phone these days, I put the phone away and I make sure that I'm actually focusing on the stretch and using my breath to help that stretch. I do Tai Chi and Qigong, which is moving mindfulness essentially. Yeah. And I reframe traffic lights instead of getting pissed off at them that I was stopped and they were interrupting my busy schedule, that it was a chance to breathe. So they're kind of some of the little things, and then I like to do longer practices on the weekend when I have a bit more time.
I love that. I think one of the things I've seen in mindfulness, I've seen it used in a lot of corporates. I tend to see it as a tick box exercise that we've done something this month. And I find mindfulness, I'm a big believer in it, but I find what happens, especially in a corporate environment, it just doesn't connect to people's everyday life. And I love what you did then because it just connects to what you do in an everyday life and through the app, but also you as an athlete as well. It works in your world. And I think connecting it to the traffic light thing is a really good example. So I think just when people bring it to something they can do in their day, not on top of their day, because everyone thinks, oh, it's something else I've got to do. Oh my God, it's a real drain. I got to tell you, we were Finn, who's producing this here, and I were watching Letterman. He was interviewing Kanye West. And he's an interesting cat, Kanye, but he had an absolutely fantastic thing. I knew you'd love this. David Letterman said to him, so Kanye, how's the new diet going? And Kanye said, I don't do diets, I do livets. I don't like diet. It doesn't make sense to me because what I'm doing is actually so I can live longer. So I have livets, not diets. What an absolute classic. I mean, he's a character, but that's pretty funny.
Love it.
What's your training now? And you've got you're constantly training, but you've got the Olympics obviously as a goal for Tokyo. Tell me, what's a week like for Hannah? What do you do during the week? What's the big things you do every week?
So I generally get up at 5 a.m. each day. When I have a sleep in, that's 6 a.m. So that'll be a Friday, which is the sacred rest day of the week.
Now, can I just stop you here? Now, Finn was wondering whether it was 5. That was 5 a.m. You get that, not p.m. You got that? Just wanted to check on the Gen Z producer here. Yep. So 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. to sleep in, which is reinforcing that.
Mm-hmm. So generally 5 a.m. get up every day. I do gym twice a week for strength training. And then I'm on the bike 6 days a week, and generally sessions will be between 2 and 4 hours long, and I'm training about 20 hours per week on the bike. And then I'm also doing a weekly Tai Chi and Qigong class, and then doing my daily practices of mindfulness, getting excited here, bashing the microphone.
And take us in one of those. So what, Qigong? What's that one?
Qigong.
Qigong. What's Qigong?
So I like to think of it as mindfulness in motion, but essentially it's a series of postures and movements that you go through, and you're looking to work every single muscle, ligament and tendon within your body through that phase. And it's all about, there's different energies within the body and utilizing those energies in a helpful way for perhaps if you're targeting healing and restoring, etc., etc. But there's a lot of Chinese medicine behind it in terms of, okay, so this position's targeting this acupuncture point and therefore this meridian of the body and these organs and blah, blah, blah. So I think I like it because it's a bit different from your traditional formal mindfulness practice of sitting and focusing, for example, on your breath or your senses, etc. Whereas this is bringing in movement to it, and you get a pretty good release afterwards. But I think most importantly, I just have the most amazing teacher. She has one of the world's biggest hearts, and so that connection and that space to not be Hannah the athlete or Hannah who works at, the Victoria State Emergency Service and just kind of have a little bit of time out is absolutely critical.
And how did you get into that? So the sort of Chinese medicine you mentioned a couple of times. What led you to that?
So I have been having regular traditional Chinese medicine sessions on a kind of, every 3 weeks or so. And that's part of the weekly schedule as well as having some type of treatment, whether it be physio, Chinese medicine, soft tissue, psych, etc., etc. So I've been having it for a long time. I'm a big believer in acupuncture. I've literally seen the power of it.
Yes.
And then in terms of the Qigong and Tai Chi, it came at a period last year when I was completely burnt out after coming back from the World Championships, and I put on 6 kilos. I thought I had depression, but it just turned out that my leg had a systemic infection and I had a whole body infection, and I had antibiotics and I was actually okay.
Can I just stop you there and say that there was an upside to that, which was, ladies and gentlemen, that's the only time I was able to keep up with Hannah. It was actually when she put on 6 kilograms and had an infection in her leg. So I just want you to know that I felt good about that. You may not have, but I was like high-fiving going, my God, I think I've still got something. Now you've told me that, I'm going backwards.
I think Rob's being a bit modest there. He whooped my ass on a recovery ride 2 weeks ago.
No, I don't think so.
But during that time, I was just listening to a podcast, and it was of this lady who was in a bit of a well-being space, and she mentioned Tai Chi and how useful she'd find it. And so I just Googled, Tai Chi for beginners and watched a 10-minute video and did it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that was all right. So that was just something that stuck.
Right. What I'm enjoying about your week is it's really balanced. And listening to I know the amount of training you do and the riding you're doing 6 days, the times you're up. But what I'm hearing from you also is this balance of also making sure that you're getting the soft tissue massage. You've got the influence of Chinese medicine as well from a psychology point of view, but also from a physical point of view as well. So is that something you're aiming for as well, to be really balanced in terms of putting your body under stress or your mind under stress, but then actually balancing it back the other way to look after it.
Oh, yeah. Recovery is just as important as what I do on the bike.
Yeah.
Because I know I've trained my friends well in terms of another piece of that puzzle is that when it gets to 9 p.m, everybody knows it's pumpkin time and that Hannah needs to go to bed at 9 p.m.
That's
I was actually out doing a talk a few weeks ago. It was a dinner talk, and I was
Right.
telling them how the importance of sleep and
Yes.
to help with resilience and recovery. And I'm like, so my bedtime's 9 o'clock, and it got to like 8:45 that night after I'd finished speaking, and everybody was like, "Han, go, you need to get to bed." I'm like, that is genius.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I love that because, the guy, Finn and I love to watch our movies. That's what he's doing. He's studying a lot of movies and things. So I say to him, look, if we're going to do a movie, it's like literally got to be on by 7. It's got to be on by 7.
Yep.
It's like, I just can't, balance the books, basically, at doing that. So that's interesting. Now, one of the things when I talk about you to other people, especially people who know you well, who either train with you, cycle with you, they go, my God, Hannah, she's just a ball of positivity. And that's exactly how I describe you. You're one of the most positive people I've been with. And I remember riding once, I think it was David Long or AJ, we were doing a ride early in the morning, and we were just, we could smell the coffee, maybe 15 kilometres away, and we're struggling through 6:30 in the morning, we're just getting there, we're thinking, we're nearly there. And then you come past with this just grin on your face, flying past us, going, whoa, here we go, down this hill, and we're just like, wow, and it was so infectious that we're just like, yeah, we're alive. How cool is that? How do you do that? What is it? What drives you in being so positive, and as much as I said anyway, but having that such positive energy?
To be honest, Rob, like when you sent me a message and said, Han, I'd love to catch up with you and do an interview, and you're one of the most positive people I know, I was just like, oh, really? Thanks. I think I just see myself as Hannah. I think gratitude plays a really big role in my outlook on life. Growing up with a little bit missing and having a single mum, and she had 2 kids under 5. She was working full time. She was studying an MBA, and she was making decisions between, do I sell the house or do I sell the car to survive? And sorry guys, we can't afford to have this in your lunch boxes, but we can have peanut butter sandwiches. Right. I never want to see another peanut butter sandwich in my life again. But I think growing up with that, and then too, I went to a Christian school, and so gratitude plays a big role in that. So that's, I think, a really big key, but also well-being and studying well-being and living well-being has been a really big part of my life now for the past 7, 10 years. And our brains, as we know, there's this thing called neuroplasticity, and we can train our brains. And the beautiful analogy of, so typically speaking, a person, we're genetically wired thanks to our evolution and having to run away from danger and surviving. So when we're genetically attuned to all of the negative shit that happens in life. But through training that muscle of brain, we can flick that and make, instead of all of the negative stuff, which is naturally like Velcro, we can make the positive stuff more like Velcro instead of like Teflon. Yeah. So I think there's that aspect, but there's also the Hannah Macdougall, the person, and I have my bad days, and there's, when I don't get enough sleep, I get very hangry as well. And with my family, they see it all, the tears, the happiness, the pain. So yeah, it's a mixed basket there. But I think those 2 key things in terms of gratitude and brain training, mindfulness, etc., have played a really big role in that.
Yeah, I think you have to be intentional about it, which you obviously are, being intentional about the training of the brain. I love that Teflon Velcro. I think that's a really great point. Let's switch gears a little bit, because one of the things that I've done, and you've done it far more successfully, but I love what you've done, is you've changed sports. So you were at the swimming to the cycling. What was the shift between going from swimming, which you clearly were awesome at, and you've represented, I think, Australia since 2001. You've done so many things. You've been a captain of swimming as well. So what was the change between swimming and cycling? Why did that happen?
So it got to the point where, unfortunately, I hated it.
Yeah.
I was
Burnout?
good at it.
Yeah.
I would definitely say it was burnout.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it from such a young age for so long, and you guys would have swum up and down a pool. That black line does not change. It's the same black line.
Right.
Every single morning. And so I think when you're dedicating so much of your time, energy and effort to something, you got to like it. Love it, I would say. And I mean, there's moments in cycling when I do have a lot of leg pain, or it's pissing down with rain and I can't feel my hands because it's so cold, that I'm like, why am I doing this? But there's still that underlying drive and love of the sport itself, whereas I lost that in swimming.
Yeah.
So it was just a process of elimination in terms of still want to go to Paralympics, what are the Paralympic sports, can't catch a ball to save my life, don't need more scars. The end of my leg is about the size of a 10-cent piece.
Right.
So I get stress fractures pretty easily. So all kind of running sports are out.
Yep.
So it literally boiled down to rowing and cycling.
Okay.
And rowing was another early morning water-based sport.
Right. Right.
Which was my logic at the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Cycling can still be an early morning water-based sport.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I loved the freedom, the adventure, being outside, which I had really missed with the swimming, being in an indoor environment. I'm definitely a road cyclist.
Right.
You know, take my hats off to the trackies.
Yeah.
I'm an outside road cyclist.
Yeah. That's an interesting view. I spoke with Alyssa Camplin on this issue when she was wanting to be an Olympic athlete. And people always think she was a snow skier, and she just wasn't. Like, she just wanted to go to win gold at Olympics or go multiple times. And she did so many sports all through this, and I didn't know. She sailed, she did a whole lot of things, all successfully. But one of the things she said to me was, if you're not passionate about it, it'll never last. And she said, I could never get passionate on running. She said, I could do it. I was quick at it. But she said, I just was never passionate to keep it going. And then when she got into the snow skiing, it was literally a bit like you, eliminating variables. And then one of hers was, what are we world class at? What is there good training at locally here? What is reasonably close, even though she drive like 3 hours to Buller and things. But it was around just those elimination of what's in the Paralympics, what can I do next?
Yeah.
Any similarities between swimming and cycling? Is there any stuff you brought across from your training in swimming that you're able to apply in
there was
cycling?
a lot of things in terms of how to set perhaps more effective goals, how to reach out to support networks and ask for help when you need it, the different, elite athlete mentality of pushing yourself to limits or past the limits, dealing with pain, the psychological skills of resilience and mental toughness, knowing how to travel, taking your own pillow with you. All of those little things were easily transferred across.
Right.
It was just you had to kind of learn how to ride a bike.
Yeah, and had you ridden bikes much
Not
before?
much, no.
Yeah.
A little bit as a kid, but never intensely or more than kind of just to get around the block and muck around with my mates.
Right. And so now, as you moved into the cycling, and you've been clearly riding overseas and competing overseas, what was the probably biggest learning when you went overseas for the first time cycling?
It's a lot easier to travel as a swimmer. And if you're looking for a sport, I reckon either running, because all you need is some running shoes and maybe a few other bits and pieces, or table tennis. Small bats, small balls.
Easy.
Cycling, equestrian, rowing. Whew. That
it?
was one thing I learned, that cycling and travelling with bikes, because you have your road bike and your TT bike when we're travelling with the team, was one thing that I learnt about very quickly, and then how to put it back together.
So you become also the bike mechanic as well.
Thankfully, we're blessed and we do have mechanics that travel with us. So if we get a little bit stuck, which I usually do, then I just kind of say, Mikey, can I have a bit of a hand, please? So that was a massive learning curve. And then also just the world of cycling, how it works in terms of registration and setups, and what the differences are between competing at an international level versus, locally, etc. Getting drug tested again, although that was familiar.
Right, it would have been through swimming.
Yeah.
And on your body though, because with the prosthetic, would have been completely different, wouldn't it, from between swimming and cycling, and the way you used that? Was it a different prosthetic you used, or was there specific ones you have? How does that work?
In swimming and to race, I wasn't allowed to use a prosthetic because it's classified as an aid. Right. Whereas cycling, I could either choose to ride with a prosthetic, or not, and then that would influence the classification that I'm in.
Okay.
So I chose to ride with one because I think that's a lot healthier for my body, if I have the choice. So yeah, very much it's been a big learning curve in, you know, having a foot, not having a foot, angles of the cycling leg, weight of the cycling leg, pin system, and then trying to not hit that pin on the bottom and getting bone bruising, heat, and then you have leg swelling. It's been a massive learning curve, and we're still in it.
It must be huge. It must be just a whole system in itself. Just getting that right. Just listen to you there about the angles and the points and the weight distribution, and I can just imagine as I sort of think through my head today about how that dynamic all works. And it must be evolving. Is it continuing to evolve with design and that type of thing as well? You're continuing to do that? Design
and technology in terms of 3D printing, and like I reckon if I had 3, you know, biomechanists and a team of scientists working on it, they might be able to nut out what is the best after about a year.
Right, really?
We don't quite have those resources.
Time sometimes to do it.
Time. Yeah. So yeah, at the moment we're looking at maybe changing the angle of the cleat a little bit to get the force going more perpendicular through the pedal, and then how can we make it more aero, but then is lighter necessarily better, or do you want similar weight to your other legs so that you're more even?
Yeah. And
lots of questions.
And how many, when you travel, do you take spare?
Yeah.
With you? I always wondered about that.
I try and take a spare walking leg.
Right.
If I have a spare cycling leg, which we're working towards, then I will start travelling with a spare walking leg, and then I might travel with a wet leg as well for like beach or shower or stuff like that.
Okay.
So I do have a dedicated leg bag that goes underneath the plane. And has fragile written all over it. Right. And that thankfully travels for free because those add up.
Now, you told me once, and I might have got the story slightly wrong, but was it the case you were training in Europe and you came through like a roundabout and a guy didn't see you and he crashed straight into you, but he crashed into your prosthetic? And that was kind of a good thing, but a good thing in a way, but you basically had to kind of, get that thing out of his front bumper bar. Was that the story?
Similar. I was just walking on the street in Italy,
right?
With a bunch of people, and the motorbike came up and he clipped my prosthetic leg, and his number plate come flying off, and he started abusing me in Italian, being ah, and I'm like, oh, dude, you've just nearly killed me. And he drove off and muttered, and there was really deep gouges in my prosthetic in the carbon, and I was like, phew. Glad it was outside. Otherwise, I would be in hospital with probably a leg off right now.
Exactly. So all the legs are carbon that you run?
Yes.
Very different.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And so when we talk about you started talking about some of the people you work with now. Who are the principal people in Team Hannah? So in Team Hannah on her quest in cycling now, who's around you? What sort of roles do they have?
Oh, there's a big team.
Yeah.
And I'm so lucky. So we have obviously the Hurt Box and David Sturt, who heads up there, and so I have all of my Hurt Box family. And then we have Nick Owen and the whole of my Victorian Institute of Sport family. So Nick writes my programs and does my coaching and, checks in and says, this went well, you didn't do this hard enough. Those kinds of things. And then there's soft tissue therapist, my physio, Natalie McCall, my TCM practitioner, Michael, my Tai Chi teacher. Nick does sports science as well, so he kind of covers those two bases, which is great. Nutritionist, Kylie, and doctors, Greg.
What do you reckon, about 10 all up?
Probably maybe 15.
Yeah, so maybe.
Or so.
Right.
Yeah, and then friends and family.
Yeah, so there's 15 probably in the core. I think it's really important because people don't associate that with. It's never on your own, and even though cycling might appear to be a very individual sport.
Yes.
That's probably the big thing when I came from sailing to cycling was the biggest change for me was to realise that actually this is a really big team sport, even though there might be the one person who's sort of sprinting or doing something. It's actually not that, and the whole peloton thing was new to me about how much work is done by the team.
Yes,
that was the bit that was
it's massive.
I don't think it's that widely known or acknowledged about how big the teams are and what the team does in the sport, because it appears to be an individual, and then you've got the 15 outside of that. When you're picking a coach, and we know your coaches. What do you look for in a coach? So top 3 things.
Yeah, top 3. Ooh, you're making me less bubble now. I think there has to be that connection on some level. So that connection needs to involve respect for each other and as people. And then I think that coach needs to be able to... I would never want to be a coach, by the way, because I ask way too much of them. They need to be able to know when to push you and when to say you need to back off now, because generally you will find athletes, whether it be more grassroots or elite level, we're going to push ourselves. We're going to do stupid things. So they need to say, okay, yes, this is the time to push and this is the time where you need to recover.
Right.
This is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So, and then I think just having your best interests at heart in terms of working alongside what goals do you actually want to achieve, how are we going to do that, what are stepping stones, sorry, getting way too excited, and that's going to help us get there. They would be my top 3 things. Right.
And now your pathway, so you've just come back from overseas. Tell us about your last trip. Come with the good side and then some of the other side.
It was a bit of a bucket of pain, to be honest. I was in really good form leading into that trip, and I was so excited to race and to see what I could do, because when you ask your legs to do something, usually in training you're fatigued and they just don't. You're like, oh no, what are you asking me to do now, Hannah? Whereas when you start to freshen up and sharpen the pencil, and it's like, okay, let's go. And they're like, yeah, woohoo! So I was excited about that, and being with the team is always awesome. Not having to cook and wash is also awesome.
That's awesome.
The weather and being in Italy, fantastic. Gelato post-race, fantastic. And then a couple of days before I raced, I had a crash. Technically my second crash for the trip. The first one was just a little tumble when we're doing skills, and it was wet and my back wheel slipped. That was neither here nor there. But this one, I avoided a car and came down really hard and hit the back of my head and got a concussion, and my ribs were really sore, and I think I was running on adrenaline for the races in Italy, and I picked up a silver and a bronze there, and still put out all right power, like power PBs for this year in those races. And then
hang on a second, you raced with after the concussion and with the ribs. I thought that happened afterwards.
No.
Because you did really well. What were the results you had?
So that race I got the silver and the bronze, and then we raced in Belgium a week later, and I picked up a silver in the road race.
Yeah, okay. So it was... that's amazing. I mean, they're amazing results, and I think that's adrenaline, and you're over there and all that. I mean, that must be, you must have been happy with the results given. I know you know you had the issue the falls which you didn't want, but still given that when you balance it though.
It's funny, because I think my brain only remembers all the pain,
right? And
so people are like, "Han, well done," and I'm like, It's kind of like, don't mention the war.
Right, yeah.
So yes, it was good, and I think because I was in such good form, I was also able to do that.
Right.
I don't recommend doing it though. Stay on the bike, people. Stay on the bike.
Not as a pre-training to fall up. Yeah, and so now you've done that. What is the pathway from here to selection for Tokyo? What's your next steps for that?
So we're off in August. We're off to Canada for a World Cup.
Right.
Then we head over to Europe, and we're racing at the World Championships middle of September.
Yep.
So at this point in time, we're looking to gain as many points as we can to qualify quota slots for Australia.
Right.
So Australia can qualify 6 quota slots for females in paracycling.
Yeah.
So I think we have essentially up until after the World Championships in May next year.
Right.
To qualify those points.
Yep.
We then get allocated those slots, and then Cycling Australia essentially rank the females that are up for eligibility. So at the moment, if I repeat what I did last year at World Champs and do that again, and it is a little bit grey because the course for Tokyo is on a racetrack, and is very hilly and technical, whereas the World Championships is dead flat.
Oh, okay, right.
So you've kind of got to have a few strings to your bow there in terms of do well at Worlds, but also show that you can be very good at hills and technical stuff.
And are you focused on both still, on time trial and road, or is it in particular?
Just mainly time trial.
Yeah.
Because for Tokyo Paralympics, my road races combined with the class above.
Okay.
So the girls who might be missing maybe a couple of fingers,
right.
Compared to half a leg, and it's whoever crosses the line first. There's no factoring or anything.
Okay.
So there's no really point. Time trial it is.
Right, so time trial's the main focus.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so with your time trialling, I mean, you and I were doing a time trial at Q the other day. I was always interested to ask you on that, is when you're doing a time trial, what's your warm-up for that? What's the regular activity, your time trial, say maybe 35, 40 minutes? What would be the warm-up to balance that?
Yeah, I've got a very specific routine that I've created, and I think that really helps people to create their own routine and what works for them, because once you start going through those motions, the body is just like, this is race time.
Yeah.
Let's start getting into a race zone. So for me, I start, I have breakfast 3 hours out. I have my beetroot shot 2 hours out. I have my double shot of caffeine when I'm just hopping on the ergo 40 minutes out.
Yeah.
And then I have my specific race where it's essentially a mixture of pattern of elevating the heart rate, decreasing, elevating, decreasing, and working up to threshold and above.
Right.
And finishing off with a few sprints so that, 15 minutes before the start of the race, you get off the bike, you put on your helmet, you roll down to the start line, have a little bit of honey before I start racing, and away you go.
Away you go.
Yeah.
The part I was just, one of the part I was missing of Hannah's was I think I do the away you go part. I think about everything up until that point, I got to work on. It's impressive. Now, last time I saw you run a full disc wheel sometimes. When do you use the full disc? When don't you use the full disc?
I'll generally always use a full disc for a time trial.
Is it just wind?
Unless it's 50-kilometre gusts of wind, I won't use it. But if I've got a headwind and a tailwind, I'll still use it.
Right.
Definitely, it's the front that you've got to be a little bit more careful of.
Yeah.
So wind dependent will influence more my front wheel rather than the disc.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you're travelling overseas, how many wheels do you take with you?
Only 3.
Only 3. Is that because I don't know the rules.
Because we generally have only 40 kilos of luggage.
Right.
And with 2 bikes, that goes really quick.
Oh, imagine.
It's literally the disc and my 2 race wheels. And then Cycling Australia usually has a few wheels we can borrow if we need to.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And when you're going overseas, the Cycling Australia, does VIS go with you overseas?
No, it's just all Cycling Australia.
Just Cycling Australia. And they do the support cars and all the rest of the gear that has to go with it. Excellent. So what are you focused on now? You're healing up. I think you're probably pretty close to being better, I guess, now, apart from the ribs. Were the ribs still sore from that incident? Yeah, because they take time.
They shouldn't be. 9.5 weeks. Anyway, my doctor's like, soon, Hannah, soon.
Soon. Yeah, no, ribs is tough, really tough because you're breathing and you know that. What are you focused on now? What are the, 3 things you're working on now to improve on?
So we're just finishing endurance block this week. And then we start moving into more of a TT-specific block. So we're really focusing on, at the moment, TT positioning. So we have at the VIS a really cool program where we set up my TT bike. I'm on a green screen and there's cameras and I can watch this computer program while I'm in my TT position, and it spits out if I'm in a green, red or orange traffic light system coding where green is yes, we're within 1% of your ideal TT position. Orange is, 3 to 5%, etc. And red's plus 10%, for example. So we're really working on that TT positioning. We're also working on getting my cycle leg right, so some angles and weights and everything. And then I need to be pain-free.
Yeah.
These ribs need to be healed.
Fantastic. Now, what's your website, Hannah? Because that's a great website, some great resources and all sorts of stuff. What is that? What's that?
So that's just www.hannahmacdougall.com.au.
Beautiful. And you also do a great Instagram too. I love your Instagram you do. What's the handle on that one?
Hannah Macdougall 06.
Hannah Macdougall 06. So yeah, guys, check out both the website of Hannah's stuff. There's a great blog on there which she contributes to, and you can read more about what she's up to. Plus the Instagram, she's always a great contributor on the Instagram side. I know she had some fantastic quotes on your website. I know she had one from Aerosmith. Are you a rocker, Hannah? Where are you getting that from? Is that what's going on there?
It's my secret cupboard self that comes out every now and then.
Hairspray goes in and says, massive glam rock. That's been fantastic. Hey, thanks for joining us today. It's been really great to find out so much. We covered a lot of ground during this. Look, good luck with the rest of the riding, and no doubt I'll see you on the road as you go past and disappear in the distance. All right, thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.